now you might be sitting on your couch, mindlessly scrolling through your phone, casually rubbing your dog's belly like it's the most normal thing in the world. Maybe your dog is wearing a ridiculous little sweater. Maybe it eats food that costs more than your lunch. Maybe it even has its own birthday cake, which is adorable and also completely insane. Because if you hit rewind, traveled 30,000 years back to the dead of night during the Ice Age, and stood outside a human camp, rubbing their belly is the absolute last thing you'd want to do. You would run.
Because back then, their ancestors weren't pets. They were the eyes just beyond the campfire, the teeth in the dark, the apex predators competing with humanity for prey. And somehow, out of all the dangerous animals humans encountered, wolves became our closest companions. Not monkeys, not horses, not cows. Wolves, the animals that could outrun us, outsmell us, outhear us, and probably ruin our entire evening.
The weirdest part? Humans didn't actually invent dogs. No ancient tribe sat around a campfire and said, "Guys, what if we created a fluffy creature that can shake hands, catch frisbees, and wear seasonal costumes?" That meeting never happened. For decades, the orphaned wolf cub hypothesis dominated the scientific community. It sounds very cute. A primitive hunter finds a tiny wolf puppy, he brings it back to camp, everyone falls in love with it, and boom, humanity invented the dog. Beautiful story, very emotional. Also, biologically, kind of a disaster. Because if you hand raise a wild wolf pup, it might act tame for a few months, but then puberty arrives. And puberty for a wolf is not awkward school photos and mood swings. It is teeth, territory, destruction, aggression. A wild wolf's instincts fully awaken. You cannot love a wild animal into domestication just by being nice to it.
Dogs were not created by one cute adoption story. They were created by a slow evolutionary accident that lasted tens of thousands of years. Some wolves simply feared humans a little less, and some humans simply chose not to kill them immediately. That was enough to begin the greatest interspecies relationship in the history of Earth. And it all started with garbage. Yes, garbage! To understand where dogs came from, we need to dig through what humans left behind. Around 30,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers were incredibly messy. When they hunted down a mammoth or a giant deer, they'd eat the best parts, but they left scraps behind. Bones, skin, rotting meat, cracked skulls. Basically an Ice Age buffet with terrible hygiene. To a starving wolf in the dead of winter, the edge of a human camp was a miracle. Free calories without the risk of being impaled by antlers. But there was one fatal catch. To get that food, a wolf had to come near humans, and humans had spears. Every wild animal has a flight distance, the closest a threat can get before it bolts. Most wolves had a long flight distance. If humans came too close, they fled. And the wolves that were too aggressive, they got themselves killed. But in every wild population, there is genetic variation. Some wolves were born a little different, less fearful, more curious. They looked at those strange, fire-making, hairless apes and thought, dangerous, but also snacks. Nature began rewarding one very specific personality trait. Not strength, not speed, not bigger teeth. Calmness. The wolves with a shorter flight distance got to eat the most scraps. Better survival meant more puppies, and those puppies inherited the same lack of fear gene. Generation after generation, a new kind of wolf began to appear. A wolf that followed humans. A wolf that lived near the edge of the camp. Not fully wild anymore. Not a dog yet. Something in between. This wasn't careful, human-led design. It was much closer to self-domestication. The aggressive ones died. The terrified ones stayed away. The calm ones ate. And over time, survival of the fittest became something much stranger. Survival of the friendliest. Now, you might be wondering, okay, sure, they got calmer. But how did terrifying Ice Age predators turn into floppy-eared animals that wag their tails and try to eat socks?
For a long time, scientists were equally clueless. Until 1959, when a Soviet geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev accidentally stumbled upon a powerful clue in Siberia. To simulate domestication, he started an experiment using silver foxes from fur farms. Every generation, he did one simple thing. He chose the tamest foxes and bred them. He didn't train them, he didn't teach them tricks, he didn't reward them for sitting politely like little gentlemen. He simply selected the foxes that were least aggressive toward humans. A few decades later, something eerie and almost magical happened. The foxes started acting like dogs. They wagged their tails, barked, whined for attention, and licked the scientists' hands. But the truly shocking part wasn't their behavior. It was their bodies. Their ears started to flop. Their snouts became shorter. Their tails curled up. Their coats developed patches of black and white. Scientists call this phenomenon domestication syndrome. A highly influential hypothesis suggests its core driver involves something called neural crest cells. When scientists selected for less aggressive foxes, they were actually selecting for animals with smaller adrenal glands, which means less stress and adrenaline. But in an embryo, the exact same stem cells that build the adrenal glands also build cartilage, jawbones, and pigmentation. So when evolution turned down the wolf's aggression dial, it accidentally weakened the cartilage in their ears, causing them to flop. In other words, nature selected for calmness and accidentally gave us floppy ears, which is honestly one of evolution's funnier side effects. Tens of thousands of years before humans ever intentionally bred dogs, those scavenging wolves on the edges of camp were already quietly altering their appearance. They became smaller, softer, less intimidating, less "I will eat your family," and more "I might steal your bone and sleep near your fire." Gradually, humans realized these floppy-eared scavengers were actually incredibly useful. Wolves can smell predators from miles away. They can hear high-frequency sounds humans can't. A proto-dog hanging around camp was basically a prehistoric alarm system. Furthermore, humans are visual hunters. Dogs are scent hunters. Together, that combination was almost unfair, like giving a Stone Age human a biological search engine with legs. Renowned anthropologist Pat Shipman even proposed a bold hypothesis. Dogs might have given Homo sapiens a crucial competitive advantage that helped us survive while the Neanderthals went extinct. We had dogs to help us track prey, haul meat, and guard camps. In the brutal math of the Ice Age, even a small advantage could mean survival. As this interspecies alliance deepened, something even stranger happened. Dogs began to literally hijack human biology. Think about what happens when your dog looks at you. Not just glances, I mean that deep, dramatic, emotionally manipulative stare that says, "I have never eaten in my life," even though dinner was 8 minutes ago. When you and your dog lock eyes, both of your brains release massive amounts of oxytocin. That is the exact same love hormone that floods a mother's brain when she looks at her newborn baby. A wild wolf would never do this. If you stare into a wolf's eyes, it does not think, "Wow, we have such a special bond." It thinks, "Is this a threat?" Dogs evolved the ability to hack straight into our maternal instincts, and they didn't stop there. They reshaped their faces. Anatomists discovered that dogs have a specific facial muscle called the LAOM, levator anguli oculi medialis. This muscle allows them to raise their inner eyebrows, creating the famous puppy dog eyes. In wolves, that muscle is weak or absent. Dogs possess it because subconsciously, humans are suckers for baby-like faces. We are wired to pity, feed, and protect animals that look sad and helpless. Over time, dogs reshaped their behavior, their bodies, and their faces just to make humans feel something. And it worked. Because today, a 12-pound dog can look sad for 3 seconds and convince a grown adult to apologize. When human society changed again, dogs adapted right alongside us. We invented agriculture and started eating wheat. Dogs living with us gradually retained more copies of the AMY2B gene, making them much better at digesting starch, something wild wolves struggle to do. They walked beside us out of the Ice Age, into farms, into ancient kingdoms, into wars, into modern apartments where they now bark at delivery drivers like the fate of civilization depends on it. But this partnership hasn't come without a cost. Once humans mastered genetics and breeding, we snatched the steering wheel from evolution. For most of history, selection was about survival and utility. But in the last 2 centuries, to satisfy human aesthetics and vanity, we started breeding dogs for appearance on an extreme scale. We twisted their skeletons into absurd shapes. Cavalier King Charles Spaniels have skulls squeezed so tight they can barely house their own brains. German Shepherds with exaggerated sloped backs suffer from severe hip dysplasia. Flat-faced breeds struggle to breathe. We took the wheel of evolution and sometimes drove straight into a wall. We gave dogs warmth, food, and love, but we also took much of their wildness from them.
And yet, the ghost of the prehistoric wolf still slumbers deep inside them. It is still there, under the birthday hat, under the tiny raincoat that makes your dog look like a depressed fisherman. When your dog grabs a squeaky toy and shakes it violently, that is not random. That is an apex predator snapping a prey animal's neck. Cute, but also mildly concerning. When your dog insists on rolling in the foulest-smelling mud or animal droppings, that is a prehistoric hunter using camouflage to mask its scent. When your dog follows you into the bathroom like your personal security detail, that is an ancient pack instinct. To them, you are not using the bathroom. You are separating from the group in a vulnerable place, and they are thinking, absolutely not. I am coming with you. Inside every corgi, Bichon Frise, and Chihuahua lurks an Ice Age apex predator. A very small shadow in some cases, but still.
And maybe that is why dogs feel different from every other domesticated animal.
Cats live near humans. Cows tolerate humans. Horses work with humans. But dogs joined humans. They slept near us while predators moved beyond the firelight. They crossed frozen landscapes with us. They helped us hunt. However, amidst the cold, brutal history of evolution, this relationship became more than just useful. It became emotional. At the Ain Malaha archaeological site in Israel, researchers uncovered a grave from around 12,000 years ago. Inside lay an elderly woman from the Natufian culture. Tucked beneath her curled body was the tiny skeleton of a puppy. But the detail that stunned scientists was this. One of the old woman's hands was resting quietly on the puppy's body. After 12,000 years, her hand was still there. Touching it, protecting it, comforting it. It is an eternal caress spanning 10 millennia, a goodbye that lasted longer than civilization itself. At that time, humanity didn't know agriculture. We hadn't invented the wheel. There were no cities, no writing, no machines. Humans were struggling to survive in a world of mud, hunger, predators, and cruel nature. But that didn't stop a primitive elderly woman from using her calloused hand to gently comfort an equally fragile little creature. Think about how incredible that is. 12,000 years ago, before human civilization was even built, humans already loved dogs. There was no meticulous master plan, no grand invention, no ancient blueprint labeled Project Fluffy Companion. Just a pack of starving wolves gathering the courage to take a small step closer to the fire. And humans, instead of always throwing spears, sometimes throwing bones. Evolution turned fear into trust, trust into partnership, partnership into love. And now, thousands of generations later, your dog may be asleep beside you, snoring, dreaming, occasionally twitching like it is chasing a mammoth in its sleep. It has no idea that it is a living fossil of one of the greatest cross-species alliances in the history of Earth. It does not know that this friendship began in the dark, at the edge of a fire, with danger on both sides.
But now you do. And the next time your dog looks up at you with those ridiculous, ancient, perfectly engineered puppy eyes, remember this. Inside that look is a 30,000-year-old secret. A story of hunger, fear, survival, and the most unlikely friendship evolution ever created.